Good Friday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports for CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope your weekend is off to a good start. Browns wrapped up another week of OTAs in the books. They'll get ready for another advantage in another section of the offseason program next week. Chris Sims, former NFL quarterback, on why he ranked Deshaun Watson 24th in his NFL quarterback rankings.
There's still great physical ability, right? Still has a strong arm, still moves well, maybe not like he used to, right? Because he was electric, a few years ago, moving and doing all that, right? But we talked about the 12 games, right? Still that, can make some special plays, but they're few and far between as compared to what we used to see in the old days, right? And then I think the big thing to me is he's yet to regain his groove overall as a player ever since he had his legal issues and all of that stuff that went down in Houston. He really isn't. I mean, a little bit like I just talked about with Justin Fields, he's being managed still. If you watch him in that offense and you watch Joe Flacco in the offense, you go, they were doing more offense with Joe Flacco and letting it fly. Definitely. With Watson, there was a little bit of hey, let's get him in a rhythm. Let's run a boot. Let's throw a screen. Let's run another boot. Let's run a really basic three-step drop play that everybody learns, sophomore year in high school, right? To where I go, this isn't the same guy I used to watch in Houston where they used to go, put him in the shotgun. He'll carry the fucking team, no problem, right? Now it's I hope he can make a few plays for us and, we can justify this huge contract and all of that. But, yeah, you watch the games and you go, no, they're calling the game to go, hey, let's get Deshaun in rhythm. Let's get him throwing the ball. Let's do it that way.
Then let's welcome in Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. And Jeff, I really like Chris Sims. I know prior to this year, huge believer and supporter of Deshaun Watson. There's a couple of things. One, he hadn't been healthy. That's why he hasn't gotten it on a roll. He played, 6 games last year, was it 8? They weren't consecutive. And the other thing is they're redoing the offense so that he can be the guy that they put in shotgun and say, go carry the team.
Well, some of this stuff that's being spoken is just completely contradictory. You're not going to run a bootleg with a 39-and-a-half-year-old Joe Flacco. You are going to run it with Deshaun Watson. The reason you're going to run it is because if the coverage drops on all the receivers, the same thing Chris Sims tried to say was Deshaun Watson could use his legs. The last we saw Deshaun Watson last year was the second half in Baltimore, where he was perfect after a, shaky first half is probably a fair way to assess it. And he went out and was nearly flawless in the second half and led his team to victory in one of the most difficult places to win in the entire NFL against one of the biggest rivalries the Cleveland Browns have against the team that eventually won the AFC North. To say he didn't look good is just foolish. His Tennessee Titan game was fantastic. There were some hiccups where he was injured, and then he came back for the Colt game, which we all know and now see that he was not ready to come back for. But I mean, the thing is you better have some real justifications, other than what was put out there. Look, Deshaun is obviously the lightning rod of this team. As far as A, is he even on the field? B, what is his play when he is on the field? He won more games than he lost since he's been with the Cleveland Browns. He's won more games than he's lost. And when he was with the Houston Texans and he was doing all these electric things, his last year in Houston, how did that go? Didn't go very well. Didn't go very well at all. To the point where guys like J.J. Watt apologized to him for the other 52 guys on the roster. Look, he's a lightning rod player. We all understand really the reasons why he is a lightning rod player. But the point is you were supposed to evaluate what you see. Day in, day out. It's not about anything else. It's not about having an agenda. You don't have to mention, everybody knows. You don't have to mention it. Go out there and assess what you see. But to say, they called the boot here. He threw for 300 yards against the Tennessee Titans. He went into Baltimore, absolutely just choked that franchise out, and he had a huge win for his team. It seems that the bar is different when judging Deshaun Watson. I know why. I get it. But, if your job is to be an analyst and analyze, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. And, you better make sure that you've got all your bases covered.
All right. So, we saw yesterday, Watson throwing. He's thrown at OTAs. It's a schedule. He throws a day, has a day off, throws a day. I know you've kind of addressed this. It isn't about the. I mean, you'd rather he be throwing than not throwing. But how he looks now, I guess it's the early stages of ramping him up.
And I talked about this, last week when it happened, because there was a day he didn't throw in front of the media. And I actually suggested it was the right thing to do. Because, whatever he's going to do, there's either they're going to be those that just take it and say that he's 100% fine. He's absolutely ready to go. And he could go out there and have a session where he went 10 of 10, not a ball, no balls hit the grass. Everything was crisp and clear. And there's still going to be some that are going to find some way to critique it. The thing that I think everybody, and this is the biggest issue I have with it, is nobody from the Cleveland Browns are telling you he's 100%. Nobody from Deshaun Watson's camp is telling you that he's 100%. Nobody is, basing it on whether or not he can play a game tomorrow, which doesn't matter because we're not playing a game for 3.5 months. So all of that stuff just, it just gets completely lost in, the conversation of it. Did he work out yesterday with me there? Yes. Did he take every single rep? No. The Browns also have 4 quarterbacks on their roster, and they were breaking in a brand new backup quarterback who has zero familiarity with this offense or any of the players here. He is not supposed to be doing everything. Look, he could have very easily ducked, stayed in Los Angeles, and said, "I'm getting my work in here. I am here with my team who set up my plan specifically through the team." But he's still there, and he's still got work in, and he has been getting work in. The goal is for Deshaun Watson not to peak at the end of May. The goal is for Deshaun Watson to hopefully be peaking come September 8th when the Dallas Cowboys come to town. This is maybe part of the problem because we're also football dry right now. We're going to take any little bit we can get and, basically make it more than it is. But the positives are there. And, he's not. Look, nothing there at OTAs is essentially done 100% anyway. They don't want it to be. The whole point is that you are doing things correctly. And if you were not running your patterns correctly, we don't want you running them 100%. We want to make sure your footwork is accurate, everything else, all of that stuff. And that is what's going on with Deshaun right now. And, look, it's not going to end. This is probably going to be the way it is for him the rest of his career. And, unfortunately, that is something that he's going to have to deal with. But, anything that anybody has put up the last couple of days, you can't tell me that you really have any concerns or issues where Deshaun is at currently. Let's have these conversations when they truly matter, which would be in late August or September.
So the one thing that we've seen is the offense will look a little bit different. You're seeing some motion. Ken Dorsey and the Browns are installing a new offense. Dorsey talked about installing that offense while Watson is rehabbing.
Because of his situation, obviously, he's trying to get all the reps he possibly can from a mental standpoint, but we still want to install the offense, and we still want to, get everybody else, involved up to speed. So that puts, a lot on us as coaches and in the quarterback room to make sure we're maximizing every learning tool possible, from the different camera angles to on the practice field, making sure we're talking, live as plays are going on and all that stuff. So, you don't want to limit, what you're installing just based off of, his availability because, there's things that those other guys need to make sure they're getting reps on too.
And Jeff, the one thing is this offense will look different. We keep hearing it's going to look a lot like the offense Deshaun had with Bill O'Brien in Houston. And that's a good thing. That's what it should be when you go out and you get a guy and you pay the price and draft capital and the contract. You do everything you can to make that guy and put him in a situation to succeed.
And it's just, it's the simplicity. It's ABCs. And, hey, if this is something we know that maybe we would consider one of Deshaun's weaknesses, why are we bothering with it then? And even still, let's get him in a better time, place, you know what I'm saying? Or get him 100%. And then we'll start funneling in some of the stuff that, we want him to do that maybe is not necessarily his specialty. It's, there's a lot going on there right now. Certainly, you have a big time wide receiver here who is a new part of this offense. Elijah Moore was there this week. but everybody's kind of learning all this newness at the same time. So, there's a lot that goes in with it. And, of course, Ken Dorsey's very excited to try to get this thing as close to, installed as fast as he possibly can, understanding that there are time limitations and time restraints that he has to work with. It's a process. Look, and, and the most important thing for Deshaun, and everybody jokes about these mental reps, you can watch the film, you can read the playbook, but some people are just physical sight learners until they see it in front of them. Maybe it doesn't resonate as it does through a playbook or through watching film, and that you're just trying to find a way to get everybody on the same page as quickly as you can. For those who maybe excel in film but not on the field as much, it's just a way to try to get everybody hopefully expedited to where they need them to be by the time they come in for that last mini camp, then get those 5 weeks and show back up in late July.
All right, so this is every team's X factor for 2024. And for the Browns, they go Jerry Jeudy. If that Alabama product can find his groove with Cleveland and establish himself as a clear second option or better in the passing attack, this Browns roster and team may truly be without a weak spot. You know what? This system would appear to be catered to a guy like Jerry Jeudy as well, and Amari Cooper, guys that run routes well.
Well, that's the thing. And, you talk about, how the team started going more vertically down the field last year, and they did that with success. That was obviously the plan and what they were hoping they were going to get with Deshaun Watson. You brought in guys who were solid route runners like Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, and then you tripled up on it this offseason by going out and bringing in a guy like Jerry Jeudy. Two guys who had, the most receptions of 25 yards or more over the last few seasons are currently on the Cleveland Browns roster. And one is Amari Cooper and the other one is Jerry Jeudy. And, with Jerry Jeudy and, he's come in here, the Browns did a great job with his extension. Obviously, they extended him right away. This is a player they were fond of for a while. And, they wanted to get in the Jerry Jeudy business as soon as they were able to get in the Jerry Jeudy business. The first thing they did is make sure that they have a long relationship with Jerry Jeudy. And that obviously worked out well for them. But Jerry, needed a change of pace. Every time he turned around in Denver, it was another quarterback, similar to what the situation was for all the Browns receivers last year, and never really got the opportunity to break out. You see the over-unders, it's over 900 yards receiving for Jerry Jeudy this year, which would be his highest statistical output to this point. I think it's going to be special for Jerry Jeudy. I think he's going to be a really, really good player for this team. And I think the most important thing for the Browns is it kind of gives them a glimpse of what the next version of the wide receiver room looks like. Because even if you don't want to say Jerry Jeudy's a 1, he is a strong number 2. And then the Browns, it depends, where the relationship goes further with Amari Cooper, how they address it from there. But it was a way to get the room younger, a way to get the room more talented, and a way essentially to recoup some of the lost draft picks that were sent to Houston for the Deshaun Watson trade. And you were getting a guy who was a former number 1 pick, and the Browns didn't have those type of picks the last couple of years to address the wide receiver position with.
So you mentioned the extension, and there were a lot of why did they extend him? Why did they do that? So March 19th is when the Browns extended Jerry Jeudy, 3 years, $52 million. Nick Cairns tweets this out, and it's really interesting. Since then, Devontae Smith, 3 years, $75. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4 years, $120. A.J. Brown, 3 years, $96. Nico Collins, 3 years, $73. Jalen Waddle, 3 years, $85 million. Those are all in the last 6 weeks since Jerry Jeudy was extended at 3 years, $52 million. And, Jeff, people keep emailing me when I say this. I understand that some of those have more production than Jerry Jeudy. If you don't understand that the wide receiver market as a whole is going up based on what the top end of it is doing, the bottom and the middle end is going up just as well. If you can't understand that principle, we cannot have an intelligent conversation with you. It was a really good move to extend Jerry Jeudy when they did, because the prices are just going to keep going up for wide receivers.
And what were you going to do? Play this season out? And then guess what? If you went for over 1,000 yards, then you're talking A.J. Brown money. Then you're talking maybe Amon-Ra St. Brown money. And look at it this way. $52 million guaranteed. Amon-Ra St. Brown, over $100 million.
Yeah.
Now, but if you look at it this way, so basically you're telling me St. Brown needs to double Jerry Jeudy's production. So if Jerry Jeudy goes out there and gets 900 yards this year, you're telling me St. Brown needs to get 1,800 yards. And for a lot of these guys, and St. Brown probably most likely, the statistical output's probably going to start to come down a little bit because he is going to be the 100% focal point of any defense playing the Detroit Lions. And it's going to be, we are going to take away Amon St. Brown, and we are going to make the other 10 guys beat us. It's not necessarily going to be the case for Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy got an extension, and the Browns are banking that his statistical output is going to go up. It's not necessarily that way. Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, they are great, great players. But to believe at that higher figure that they are now going to even be able to produce more, it just doesn't seem very likely because these guys are already performing at a top shelf rate. They are giving you top shelf statistical, output. And honestly, where did it really essentially get the Eagles last year? It didn't. The Browns, it's just smart. You always get out in front of this. And this happened with, remember Myles Garrett? Myles Garrett was the highest paid defensive player in the NFL for what? 2 weeks?
Yep.
Maybe 3? It's just the way it works. And smart teams do smart things. And the Browns know, and they can look and see all these wide receivers that were eligible to be extended. And guess what they said? We're going to do Jerry Jeudy first. Because if we don't, we're going to pay a tax. Because once other guys start to get higher amount figures, then all of a sudden Jerry Judy's camp, their amount's going to say, we're going to go up. If I live in a $500,000 house, but the guy next to me's got a $1.2 million house, and the guy next to me's got a $1.1 million house, guess what? My $500,000 house is now worth $800,000. It's all about it, just the way it works. And if you can't see the simplicity of it, and so much of real world stuff does carry into sports, and anything money carries into money, whatever walk of life you're talking about. Wide receivers is a huge commodity in the NFL. And if you were proven, and in Jerry Judy's case, even slightly proven, you are going to get paid.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast, and I can step aside to a quick timeout. We will continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money Maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast, ESPN's Mina Kimes, on the challenges that she sees for the Browns in 2024. This from NFL Live.
I can see why their odds are low. And to me, it's less about the team. I still think they have an incredibly strong roster and more about the competition. The AFC North, probably the best division in the NFL. They were very good last year, despite the fact that the Steelers had a revolving door at quarterback. The Bengals didn't have their starting quarterback, Joe Burrow, for most of the season. So when you consider the division, the AFC North, and that both of those teams are likely to be better situated this year, it makes sense that the Browns are facing an uphill battle. The other thing, Hannah, is statistically we see it is harder for great defense to stick year after year compared to offense. The Browns are obviously a defense-led team. They had either the first or second best defense in the NFL last year. So to me, you're counting on the offense taking a leap this season to potentially compensate for any regression there. And as you guys have discussed, we just haven't seen recently that Watson's capable of that.
Well, Jeff, a couple of things. The Steelers' revolving quarterback door was kind of their own choosing. The Browns started and won with 4 different quarterbacks and didn't have Deshaun Watson. The North is all of the teams in the AFC North are going to face challenges based on just their schedules.
Look, I absolutely love Mina Kimes, but you can't make those excuses for 2 other teams within a division and not put that excuse. Look, if you don't want to make any excuses, that's fine. But and let's be honest here. What did Pittsburgh do that just changed their quarterback position? Where was Russell Wilson his 2 years in Denver? Yes, not in the playoffs. Justin Fields, Bears gave up on a former top 10 pick. So all of a sudden we're going to look at the Pittsburgh Steelers now and say, you know what? Quarterback position's fixed. Neither of those quarterbacks were in the playoffs last year. So, I mean, that, and look, Joe Burrow, we're talking about a guy who's coming off his second season-ending surgery. Look, Joe Burrow's fantastic. I get it. Look, they're all going to have to play the NFC East. They are all going to have to play the AFC West. Yes, the Browns drew the Dolphins, but you want to know what? They drew the Dolphins at home late in the season. Me? I think it's a pretty good draw. The Dallas Cowboys, guess what? They don't have to go to Dallas. If you want to play the Dallas Cowboys, you don't necessarily want to play them in the Star. You want to play them outside in grass. Granted, it is only September, but the Dallas Cowboys are better there than they certainly would be on grass in Cleveland. It just seems that it's just, not the most fairest thing. You want to bring up the schedule. That's fair. That is fair. And the Browns are going to need to do really well against the NFC East within the first 6 weeks of the season. The NFC East could possibly make or break how this year goes for the Cleveland Browns, ironically enough. But yeah, I mean, the last we saw of Deshaun was good. Joe Burrow, when everybody said he was healthy week 1, didn't do a darn thing against the Cleveland Browns. And not to be honest, still in his entire career hasn't done anything against the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, without question. So former NFL offensive lineman Brian Baldinger, just on what he sees with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and how he fits into this system Jim Schwartz likes to play.
Well, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the thing that's interesting about him, Tom, is you can't tell a lot of times whether it's a Jim Schwartz styled up blitz or if it's just JOK just reading the play. Like this right here. This is Garrett Wilson out of a wildcat formation, kind of a fake, and he's going to come to the outside. They're going to double team him on the outside right here, and he's just going to recognize it right away. Split the double team, because this is what he does. Like, he plays downhill as fast as any linebacker in the league. In fact, he had 20 tackle for losses, including that one right there. But then you look at him, a couple plays later, a quarter later, and they want to run this little 3-count screen to Breece Hall, and there he is right in front of you. The linebacker, he's a man coverage on Breece Hall. The center is responsible for him, but he sees it right away. And he never lets the play get started. He kills the play before it starts. And you think about the Browns, number 1 in the league last year, Tom, third down defense, 29%. Number 1 in the league, fewest first downs given up. They play a ton of man coverage. They gave, a lot of teams problems. But JOK's ability just to handle the edge, the blitzes that Jim Schwartz styles up, and then the speed of decision-making, he makes this defense elite. And I think it's time that we start giving this guy a lot of credit, because he had his best season. He led the team in tackles. Yes, Myles Garrett was the defensive player of the year. But he did lead this team in a lot of different categories, including tackles. And I think he's only going to get better in this system.
I couldn't agree more with Brian Baldinger. And the thing is, kind of was middle of season on where he just took off. And I'm curious. I want to see what Jim Schwartz does with him, allows him to do, and how the Browns utilize him this year.
Well, there's a couple factors here. And you go to that Garrett Wilson highlight they showed there. Most likely the way you see that is not a blitz, because most of the time you're not going to take JOK, who was lined up as a Mike, and blitz him basically through the guard tackle side. If you're going to blitz him, he's going to come straight up the A-gap. What that is, all right, Garrett Wilson's in the backfield. You know what? I'm taking my shot that somehow, some way, Garrett Wilson's going to have this ball and try to make a play happen. JOK, super intelligent guy, obviously Notre Dame graduate, all of that stuff. You factor that in. I think one thing, and look, it is a combination of Jim Schwartz. There is no doubt about it, because what we've learned from all these players playing under Jim Schwartz is Jim Schwartz will basically tell you, I don't care if you make a mistake, but you better be extremely aggressive and go 110%. If it don't work out, it doesn't work out, but at least you did it with conviction. The other thing, and this is one thing, and this is more where we're going to maybe credit Andrew Berry. The Browns defensive tackle, I've been covering this team since 2017. Every offseason was the defensive tackle stink. And then we would get to free agency. Not getting better. Then we'd get to the draft. Didn't get better. Then we'd wait till like August. Is somebody going to get? And I did this for like 7 seasons. Last year, they finally went out and said, this has been an issue, and it's been an issue for this franchise for a while, and it's not going to be an issue any longer. This year, they doubled down and made it even better. Brought back all the guys who were good for them last year, and then drafted a guy like Michael Hall, brought in a Quentin Jefferson, brought him in as well. So they did a lot of work. And you want to know what? When you take a guy like JOK, who is basically I don't want to say a man without a position at Notre Dame. He was basically, just basically the monster back. And it was here, line up wherever you need to. Your job is to blow up every single play, tackle the guy on every single play. And now that he has competent players around him that will keep him clean, his instincts and his high motor and his athleticism allow him to just go find the ball. And guess what? It worked out, and it worked out extremely well. And he's going to get paid handsomely for it. It was one of the most under-talked about storylines for the Cleveland Browns last year, and certainly within the NFL last year. I know I said it to you guys many times. When we were talking about JOK last year, we were talking about one of the most improved defenders in the entire NFL last year. And it seems now that everybody's going back as we start to prep for 24 and watching film from 23. You see a lot of people starting to say, hey, you want to know what? Wow, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah had a really good year last year.
All right, before I let you go, I know you've talked about this on the Locked On Browns podcast. We all know Newsome, Ward, Emerson, really good. What about the backup cornerback battles?
Well, this is the thing. It's going to be bad. It literally is going to be battles. You have Cameron Mitchell, who played some last year and showed well. You have two guys between Jones and, of course, between Justin Hardy. They're going to find a way to battle out, which is going to be cornerback 6, but be the guy who stays because you're a really good special teams player. You got Halassi, who they brought in towards the end of summer last year. Final cuts out of the Kansas City Chiefs. Browns brought him in. He can kind of do a little bit of everything. He's another guy who, he's not like you look at him and people want to look at the relative athletic score. He's not going to light you up there. But he's kind of good where it counts, like the shuttles, the 3-cone. He's got pretty decent length. So he is one of those guys where you don't get so nervous maybe just because the receiver got behind him, because he has the length and the ability to make, and cover up for it. They drafted a corner. They brought another one in, through, as an undrafted free agent. And, they want that competition. And this is really good for the corners, and it is really good for the wide receivers. Because, look, we know who the top 3 are for the Browns at wide receiver. We know who the top 3 are at cornerback. But all these other guys who are going against guys who are all going to be battling each other for 4, 5, and 6 at the wide receiver spot and the cornerback spot, it's going to be a battle every day. And, it's going to be who can stack. There's going to be guys that are going to end up getting released from the Cleveland Browns at the wide receiver position and, from the cornerback position. And it's not because they're not very good. It's going to be just because they weren't good enough to make the Cleveland Browns. Jim Schwartz knows what he's doing. I want pass rushers, and I want guys that can cover in man coverage. And he's going to have a tough time because he's only going to be able to keep 6 of them.
Jeff Lloyd, Locked On Browns podcast, as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jeff.
All the best, Dave, to all you guys. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll talk next week.
Jeff Lloyd, make sure you check him out. Always really good Browns coverage on the Locked On Browns podcast. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out, other side of the break. Film analysis, video breakdown. Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Browns wrapped up OTAs, the second week of them. Let's take a look at some of the AFC North draft choices that the Browns will have to deal with. Video analysis, film breakdown. Whenever we do that, we welcome in Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Lance, we're going to start with the Steelers. And the Steelers, they got some pretty good offensive linemen. First one, Troy Fautanu from Penn State. What did you see with him, and what do you like?
Well, he's out of Washington. He's 6'4", about 317. What I like about him is he got elite feet. So when I look at some of these draft picks, you're going to see here on his pass protection, these draft picks by the Steelers, for me, they really kind of are going to help them when they face the Browns, right? So this Fautanu, he has great feet. He's super light on his feet. He's a great pass protector. I had him as my #1 pass protecting tackle in the draft. His ability to get out of his stance is fantastic. He's one of those guys who ran a 5.0 40-yard dash. He had a 32.5-inch vertical leap. 29 reps on bench. So he's a really complete guy. He's not great in the run game, but he's very good on the edge. And the Steelers need help on the edge with the likes of Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith. So this first pick is just based on his ceiling is so high. For me, rarely people do not draft in the NFL like the Steelers. The Steelers have a knack of finding guys they need and guys that fit their mold. Fontenot's they need at left tackle. I expect him to start early and be a real force for the Steelers.
Yeah, 317 pounds and a 1.71 10-yard split. So that's pretty good. The other guy, the second round, they come right back and they go interior of that offensive line, trying to short up with Zach Frazier, a center who's 313 pounds. What'd you see with Frazier?
Well, this is the guy that totally fits. You're going to see him here, number 54. He's going to get his right arm in here. They're going to run an outside zone. He's going to get a right arm in and just kind of be an athlete and run his feet. And that's really perfect technique on an outside zone. He's got a head-up nose guard, zero technique. He's going to step with his left foot. Now, there's a couple things. Every position I watch, it's not always about the best guy. It's about, sometimes it's about the guy who just is a football player. This guy, Frazier, is a football player. He's a 4-time state champ in high school as a wrestler. And I will tell you, from 20-plus years of coaching in high school, wrestlers are a different animal. They are a different breed. Their toughness, their toughness is at another level for me. And you see this at the center. He's very good in pass protection. Gave up 0 sacks last year. He's very good in the run game. But this is a guy, for me, that fits the Steelers' mentality and a guy that's going to help them with Tomlinson and Shelby Harris and all these guys the Browns got inside. This is why they went out and got this guy to help with the movement inside. The Steelers got to get back to run the ball. This is the guy that will help them.
The next couple of guys that we're going to talk about the Steelers drafting were guys that we talked about with the Browns. Roman Wilson, wide receiver from Michigan, 5'10", about 186 pounds. What'd you see with Wilson when you looked at his film again?
This guy is going to give you elite athletic skills. He's real fast, 4.3 40 guy. He comes from a pro offense, so you're going to see here he's in a stack concept. He's going to run a smash concept, which is a corner route up to the top. J.J. McCarthy throws a great ball. This is what you see him do. He had a ton of touchdowns last year at Michigan. His numbers weren't through the roof, but that's because Michigan is a run-first team with great offensive linemen. 7 of those guys are playing in the NFL this year from last year's team, and they really spread the wealth. But he understands coming out of a huddle. He understands coverage. He understands leverage. He's much more athletic than people thought he was. He tested very well. And again, this is going to remind people of Hines Ward, in my opinion. When I watch him, I think of Hines Ward, his ability to block, his toughness, his ability to be a football player. He's a receiver. He's not a pass catcher. And I used to say that to my kids all the time. Being a pass catcher is one thing. Being a receiver is another. This guy, Roman Wilson, does everything well, including block, which is big in the NFL. So really like this pick. They need some help on the outside with their new quarterbacks, and Roman Wilson should give them that help.
Yeah, I saw the note that you made. You thought he would have a quick learning curve just based on playing in the offense, playing for Jim Harbaugh. You think the transition to the NFL will be a little easier because of that?
Well, yeah, and the verbiage, right? So not only does he come out of a huddle, so a lot of those guys in college, even in high school, they're not in a huddle very much anymore. So they get all their hand signals, even though the signals will be gone this year with college going to the headsets in the helmet. It's just the idea that they're not always up pace. They're not always, the Michigan Wolverines ran a pro offense, multiple long play calls in the huddle. They killed plays and ran 2 plays at once, et cetera, et cetera. So that offense gives him the ability to run different routes from different positions. And it's just a learning curve that he won't have compared to some of those guys coming in who are just on one side of the ball in a no-huddle, fast-paced offense like most colleges' offense are now.
So the Steelers' second third-round pick is one that I know you like a lot, Peyton Wilson, linebacker from North Carolina State.
Well, the good thing is I get to talking about him again. So this is hopefully I'll get some more on, but this is him against Connor Trey. He plays anywhere and everywhere. Now, if there's a guy who fits the Steelers mold to me, it's this guy. Obviously, I just do the film stuff, and I'm a football guy. And I'm very well aware, and I agree with the type of money they have in the NFL about his age at 24 years old, some of the knee injuries and shoulder injuries he had early in his career. But I will tell you that I watch a lot of film, and there's not one guy in the last 2 or 3 years that's been more impressive on film than this guy. Peyton Wilson is an absolute football player. 138 tackles, tackle for loss, sacks, tackles in the open field. He does everything well. And I think this guy fits the mold of what the Steelers want in the middle of their defense. I think this guy is going to play from day one, and I think he's going to be really good. He's going to be a guy that a lot of NFL teams will be very sorry they did not draft. Elite talent, 6'4", 230, can run, has all the measurables. Those measurables match up on the film. I know I'm biased, but this guy is a heck of a football player, and I think he's a guy that's going to give the Browns problems, especially in the run game.
So in the fourth round, again, the Steelers come back, and another offensive lineman, a guy we talked about the Browns potentially looking at as well, in Mason McCormick, over 300 pounds, out of South Dakota State, 6'4", 309, so a big guy.
So whatever they're doing at the Dakotas, you're going to see him cut off here. He is a drive blocking specialist. So you're going to see him. Iowa's going to run a blitz. He's at the left guard, and he's going to pick up that blitz right on the hash mark. He's very smart. He's very football smart. He has a very high IQ. And like I said, those Dakota schools, North Dakota State, South Dakota State, and all those FBS, Division I AA, I still call them because I'm older, but they have a tendency to get these guys who come in with these long bodies and then they work out and they get to a high level. And this guy is a major athlete. You're talking 35.5-inch vertical leap, 117-inch broad jump. He benched very well. He's very nasty at the point of attack. So he does have a little bit of learning to do, especially in pass protection. But when you talk about him and Zach Frazier being next to each other, you're talking about two guys that rely on being nasty when they block. They're not trying to get their hands right or their feet right. They're trying to knock the guy down in front of them. And that's very big in the Steelers offense. The Steelers want to impose their will, kind of like what the Browns offensive line has done the last couple of years. And I think the Steelers are going to try to get back to that. They're going to try to run the ball, Najee Harris and Warren, and they need some linemen. And this is a guy who might not start. I don't think he'll start. I think Frazier and Fontenot are going to start early. But I think this guy will be starting sooner than later, and they're going to have three guys that they have anchoring their offensive line for years. So, again, really tough guy, fits the mold for what the Steelers want.
Well, you know, it is the AFC North, and it seems like all of the teams, including the Browns now, have drafted pretty well. The Steelers and the Ravens historically have drafted really well. So some guys the Browns will have to deal with coming up, the guys that we just went through.
Well, yeah, you know what? And like I said, very few teams, you know, everything is based on the NFL. And I've learned this over the last couple of years because really all I do is watch the film and tell you about playmakers and what I think. And there's lots of guys who have great opinions as well. And I don't take into account, you know, their age and things like that. But very few teams in the NFL draft for what they want. They don't care about stars. They don't care about who's ranked number one. The Steelers want Steelers guys. And guys like Peyton Wilson and guys like Zach Frazier, for me, those guys fit the mold. Those guys may have not been the top of their position based on age or whatever it is. But when you watch them on film, there's very few guys that they drafted that aren't as good as anybody else. And, you know, and I use Peyton Wilson as an example. I know I talk about him highly, but when you put on the film, the only things that are against him are his age and some of the injuries he had in the past. But he is a football player, and the Steelers and the Ravens are notorious for doing that, right? Finding guys that fit their mold. And these guys that they drafted this year are in that mold as well.
Lance Reisland, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Lance.
As always, thanks for having me.
Lance Reisland, make sure you check him out. Cleveland.com. Always good video analysis, film breakdown of what is going on with both the Browns and the rest of the AFC North. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Browns defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz talked about new linebacker that the Browns signed as a free agent, Jordan Hicks, a guy he knows a lot about.
Yeah, do have some experience with Jordan. I have a lot of respect for Jordan. He's had a lot of success in the NFL in a lot of different schemes. His rookie year, he played in one scheme in Philly and then continued with me, I think, for it was 3 years. Changed schemes, Arizona, changed schemes, Minnesota twice, had sort of scheme change, and he's remained a good player through all that. So I think the familiarity with the scheme is probably a little bit overplayed, but I would say this about Jordan. Number one, he's a playmaker. Number two, he is an outstanding communicator. And we lost a lot of communication and leadership with losing Sione and losing Awalk. So it's going to fall to Jordan to pick some of that up. And, he's got a great track record of doing those kind of things.
Let's welcome in Brad Ward from the Orange and Brown Report, as well as the All Eyez on Cleveland podcast. And Brad, if Jim Schwartz likes the guy and knows him, you know what? I'm in.
Yeah, me too. It's interesting. He mentioned the loss of communication with Anthony Walker. Despite his inability to stay on the field, he absolutely was kind of the leader of that room. So you expect Jordan Hicks to step in and kind of take that role. 5 straight seasons with over 100 tackles, 3 years in Schwartz's scheme already. So he can kind of be that coach on the field. And as he said, he's an excellent communicator. So that's what they need, right? They need somebody to fill Awalk's shoes as a leader in that room more than anything.
Yeah, and he has 5 straight years of 100-plus tackles per season. All right, I know you wrote an article about this, and you look at it, it's really interesting. Top 3 position battles. You go number 3, linebacker depth. Number 2, defensive tackle rotation. And number 1, wide receiver depth. We've always talked about how good of a roster is. Take us through those, and they're very interesting to see how those will play out, I think, as well.
They are. It takes on, the roster battles take on a different view, Dave, because, the starters are pretty much entrenched in this roster, right? So your roster battles are more for impactful roles. Can I carve out a role for myself? Can I, improve my placement on the depth chart or just make the roster? So with linebackers, though, it's interesting because you've got your Hicks and your JOK, which is great. And you're going to be, 2 linebackers on the field most of the time. But when you are in base for the little bit that you are, who is going to be that guy? I think they want it to be Nathaniel Watson or Bookie Watson. They brought in Devin, Bush, and then they brought in, or they have Diabate and Tony Field in his 4th year, which was shocking to me that it's been 4 years already for him. But so you've got those guys there, but a lot of unproven after the first 2, right? So you really need somebody to take a step forward. And if somebody didn't, I wouldn't be surprised if we see them go outside or off the roster later in the process if they don't feel like somebody steps up in that role.
Yeah, and defensive tackles, I think they've upgraded that. They were significantly better last year than in previous years. I think they've upgraded it with Hall and Jefferson, I think, pretty significantly again.
Yeah, so they have a wealth of talent there, right? I think they have to probably keep 5 unless they deal with an injury, which will probably leave Siaki Ika, a guy they just drafted. And, right now it would be Siaki Ika and even a 7th-round draft pick like Juwan Briggs this year on the outside looking in, right? So that battle there for rotational snaps between the 5 guys that are going to be on the 53 should be very interesting. You know, how much can Mike Hall carve out for himself as far as snaps goes?
Yeah, and wide receiver depth, you need 1 or 2 of those guys to kind of take a step up even.
So this is fun. The wide receiver depth is fun. I like what they have there as far as depth. You know, you've got Thrash, Bell, Tillman is the guy that you kind of really hope takes a step forward, but Thrash is exciting. And now Mike Wood's back in the mix, who I, was always kind of a fan of. He looks like he's put on some upper body strength and looks good out there from what you can see. So you've got like 4 guys really vying for 2 spots there, right? That will contribute. What can they do on special teams will, of course, be a factor. But really, that 4th receiver role, that player is gonna get legitimate snaps. And who is that gonna be? Who can step up, take that, understand the choice routes, make the same reads as the quarterback? That'll all be impactful stuff. They hope it's Tillman. It could be Thrash. Thrash is exciting. So they're in a good spot there where they have a bunch of young wide receivers that could potentially be a part of this thing moving forward with a little bit of a role to contribute.
Yeah, the thing is, there's an opportunity there. Let's see who takes advantage of it. So I know you also wrote this article. Take us through this. 3 things I think I know about the Browns. So 3 starting tackle update. Browns' successful culture needs to be recreated. And we kind of alluded to this. Michael Wood's back in the mix, so wide receiver who's been injured the last couple of years.
Yeah, so he missed all last year, but looks good, looks healthy. So does Tillman. So give credit to the Browns, strength and conditioning program. They both look like they put on some good strength, upper body strength. So looks good out there, and I hope Woods can. He's always had kind of some nice shiftiness, some good wiggle after he catches the ball. So I hope that he impresses and maybe can make an impression and compete for one of those spots because I've always kind of liked him as a player. So that's interesting. But the other one, the 3 tackles thing, is something that gets talked about a lot, Dave. We heard DeJuan Jones come out and kind of give his update. I don't know if he was supposed to disclose all the information, but he did. He was like, I'm a little bit ahead of Jed Wills. We've been rehabbing together, and we know Conklin hurt his ACL and MCL, a more serious injury, even though it happened earlier in the season. And he alluded to him even being further behind in the process than both of them, in that they weren't sure what his status would be come training camp or even the beginning of the season. I've said this before. I think the smart thing, to avoid drama, controversy around, what could potentially be a $14 million contract guy, playing as your swing tackle, which isn't ideal, Dave, would be to slow play Conklin's return. I think you'll probably see DeJuan Jones and Jed Wills start and let Conklin take all the time he needs, and it'll probably sort itself out via injury or snaps or performance a couple weeks into the season. By then, you get 100% Conklin, and you can really play your best players or get your best 2 tackles out on the field.
The other thing about the culture, you can't, unfortunately, you can't make sure that it carries over from one season to another. That was a pretty big reason for the Browns making the playoffs a season ago.
It was a special group last year, right? They played for each other. They bought in, and it's not like the NBA, like with the Cavs, Dave, where like, okay, we made it to the first round last year. This year we're gonna get, we got out of the first round, and they developed together. Football and the NFL specifically, progression is nonlinear, right? Like it's not year to year. Each year is its own entity. You have to recreate that culture. Even with all the continuity they have, going back to the Greenbrier, right? Like they have to recreate the buy-in. Each season is different. Each season, the culture changes, right? There's different people. There's different things that happen. How they react to those things is how pretty much that culture is formed. So it has to be recreated. It doesn't just carry over. And a lot of people think that like,
okay before they offer him a contract extension?
I think they might. I think we would have seen the extension now. Like, personally, I've seen enough, Dave. Like, I'm good. Like, he looks like a star to me. I would, love to see him get his extension before the year. But
All right, so we will check back in with Brad Ward. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. More with Brad Ward here on Sports for CLE. Stay with us.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money Maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
We continue talking Browns with Brad Ward from the Orange and Brown Report, All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. So go ahead, finish your thought, Brad, before we get into the next topic. JOK's contract extension, you think it had already been done if they didn't want to see more?
Yeah, I just look at what they did with Delpit last year, right? Like, Delpit came on strong. Teams probably don't want to give one really good season be the reasoning for an extension. So they may be thinking, and it's a lot of money for, in their minds, a position they don't value that much, right? They may be thinking the same thing that they did with Delpit last year. Let's just see a little bit more. Let's see him avoid a major injury here early in the season. Let's see him play well like he did at the end of last year and all of last year, and then give him the extension, which is what they did with Grant, and it worked out that way. So, he missed 9 games. He had an inconsistent second year. So you could see why they would want to see maybe a little bit more. I feel like I've seen enough, but, they don't value linebacker that much, Dave.
All right. So Mike Tannenbaum, former general manager, New York Jets, why he is concerned with Deshaun Watson and the shoulder injury.
I'm not a doctor, but we're already into June here, and he's not full go, and he can only throw every other day. Based on my experience with injured players, when you hear that, look, you want to ramp them up in a responsible way, but, at some point, Deshaun Watson's got to go out and play well and put all excuses behind him, injuries and otherwise. Hannah, it's been since 2020 since we've actually seen him play meaningfully productive football on a consistent basis. And when we're talking about a shoulder on a starting quarterback and he's still not being able to go out there, and go back-to-back practices, I would be concerned if I was the Browns.
Brad, they're following a plan that was designed by the foremost shoulder surgeon in all of America. So I don't. He's not a doctor, and the doctor is telling him this is what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, I would respectfully disagree with Mike on this one. That it feels like the target mark here is training camp. Like, if he can be full go training camp, participating in everything, then I think you're good, right? I actually am happily surprised that he is throwing every other day in OTAs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think that's anything to worry about at all. He looks good when he's throwing. Of course, it's on air, so everybody looks good on air, but still. The form looks good. He's spinning it well. He's standing upright. He looks like he's moving around well. So, progress, right? Listen to the doctors, follow the plan, don't rush it back. I think he'll be back in plenty of time.
So I know you've written about this, and I'm curious. What do you think? How do you think Deshaun Watson will play in 2024? What are your thoughts? I think he's going to have a big year. I am happy that they are finally designing an offense around him.
Me too. I feel actually very strongly that if he can stay on the field, Dave, he'll figure it out and he'll have a really good year. Watched on one of the shows that we do every week, we kind of react to what he does on QB Unplugged with Quincy Avery, and it's kind of given him a platform to open up and loosen up a little bit. He seems to be in a better headspace than he's been in a couple years. Which I think is a really positive thing. You've got fresh voices, fresh faces around him. Ken Dorsey, who's been very good with quarterbacks. Now they're designing the offense to fit him ideally. He's even said little things about, like, his relationship with Stefanski on that podcast and about his game, taking what the defense gives him, where at the beginning it felt like he was trying to earn the whole contract in one throw. Now, I think he kind of gets it a little bit better. I have the utmost confidence that what we saw at the end of last year, combination of Arizona, Tennessee, and even in the second half of the Ravens game, of course, is what he can be, and even better if he can just stay on the field. If he stays on the field, he'll figure it out. And I truly believe that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Again, staying on the field, I think that's been the problem. The suspension, I get the rust, all that. Last year, he couldn't put 4 games in a row where he was playing, and you can't get into any type of rhythm. And I know you wrote an article, and I'm curious. These are potential NFL cut candidates that the Browns could target. We picked out a couple of them. So tight end, Ian Thomas from the Panthers, Irv Smith, tight end from the Chiefs, Jeff Wilson Jr., running back from the Dolphins, Kenny Clark, defensive tackle, Packers. Then you got Sky Moore, Darius Slayton, and Terrace Marshall from the Panthers, all wide receivers. Miles Sanders, running back from the Panthers. When you look at those, who in that thing intrigues you? And you can go off the board. I know you had a couple others that you had in that article too. Who intrigues you as somebody you think could fit and fit well with the Browns?
Well, I'm still looking at that tight end spot, right? I put the 2 tight ends first. That made the most sense. So Ian Thomas, not a big receiving threat, but what they are missing is just somebody that can do a little of both, right? Like, so if Njoku were to miss a couple snaps, that you could put somebody in there that can go out and run catch a pass and block. And they don't really have anybody dual threat guys that are really good blockers and can go out and catch the ball besides Njoku. That's what you had with Harrison Bryant, right? So Irv Smith would be very interesting. He's had a tough time staying healthy, but you like what he potentially could be. Now, they signed him, but then they turned around and drafted Jared Wiley, and they brought in this Baylor Cup kid as a undrafted free agent in Cincinnati. So he may end up being the odd man out after they brought him in free agency. So that's a name to keep an eye on, because Irv is an intriguing player, I think, a guy that can do both. The other name that I would mention that's not on there, just looking ahead at the tackle situation, is Cam Robinson. He was suspended, and it nullified all the guarantees in his contract. So that makes him an intriguing cut candidate, a guy who is actually a very dependable tackle. So if the Browns were looking to maybe bring in a couple options looking beyond 2024 and get them in the building, he would be somebody that I'd be interested in.
All right, before I let you go, Mike Vrabel, defensive consultant on the Browns staff, he was out at OTAs working with a lot of different elements of the team. Caught Pat McAfee's eye. Take a listen to what they were saying, Pat McAfee show, about Mike Vrabel.
Could you imagine having Vrabel just hanging around the team? What a weapon for the Cleveland Browns. This seems genius for Stefanski.
Yeah, it does. I wonder, I'm sure as the season goes too, like Vrabel's role will morph and change, and he's going to, like right now you see him running the cards for like scout team defense, trying to get the offense. Imagine these O-linemen, like what he's saying to these dudes, like how he's talking to them about how he's going to dominate them if he wanted to, put his helmet on and run right through them. Like I bet Brave's going to bring a lot of value to this team this year.
Yeah, let me tell you what he's saying right here. Ready? And sack. That's what he screamed. That's what he just screamed right there in the middle of that particular rep. But I mean, what a weapon this guy's going to be for the Cleveland Browns. I would actually put this as something that would heighten 2 to 3. I think 2 more games, winning games, with having Vrabel just hang around. He's got no real responsibility other than make the team better, right?
Yeah.
That's what we assume with these roles.
Mm-hmm. That's what it feels like, isn't it? I mean, what is this? What do we know what his title might be? I don't even know.
Is it senior consultant? Or,
yeah. Okay.
It's hey, we're not paying him shit. The Tennessee Titans are, but he's going to be hanging around. I think that's what it's called.
And Brad, the thing is, I thought he should have gotten an NFL head coaching gig. I think he's a really good coach, and absolutely, Kevin Stefanski is going to pick his brain and put him to work as much as he is willing to work.
I was with his title where they kind of framed it in a way that it was going to be partially with personnel. So, he wants to kind of learn the back end side of the front office stuff, some analytic stuff with Barry. but also, work with the players and the team and Stefanski and the new offense and the defense, help where he can, right? I did not know that he was going to be out on the field, hands-on with the players. To see that was awesome, right? Like, to see him out there, OTAs, running around, being himself, helping out, can only help tremendously. Like, he's another coach of the year, a guy that's respected by ex-player, that's respected by everybody in the NFL. A tremendous job by Stefanski on bringing him in. They had a prior relationship. We know Schwartz had a prior relationship with him. It's awesome to have him in the building, and even more awesome to actually see him out there on the field working with the guys. I think that's amazing. I thought the stars of yesterday, media availability open to practice, were him and Jameis Winston. So that was kind of the two things that I was very intrigued with yesterday.
Brad Ward, Orange and Brown Report, as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Brad.
You are the best, Dave. Thank you so much.
All right, Brad Ward, make sure you check out Orange and Brown Report. He is also the host of the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. Make sure you check it out. Always really good Brown stuff. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here Monday at 4 o'clock. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you Monday at 4 on Sports for CLE.